one of the other programs you guys offer is something called Family Constellations. Um, can you give us a brief description of what Family Constellation is? Because I don't, maybe most people aren't sure what that is.
Yeah, of course. The work that we mean by family constellations is based on the work of a German fellow named Bert Hellinger, who took the work of Virginia Satir, a famous therapist. She had something she called family constellations. Well, Bert Hellinger took that and evolved it into this glorious way of working with unconscious generational patterns. And so I encountered that work first in 1996. And I read about it in a 2-page article, and it sounded interesting. And at the time, I had a group of people who paid me to experiment on them. That was like their idea. So I thought, well, hell, why not? I'll try this out. And so, based on the description in this article, I tried it out with my group. And sure enough, astonishing things came to light that I would have had no idea were there, or no idea of that even could be a part of what was in their way. Now, because I didn't really know what I was doing, I didn't know how to work with it, so it devolved into shouting. And so I thought, okay, I want to learn how this guy gets these changes. So I was lucky enough to actually get to watch Bert Hellinger work while he was still in his prime. So every time he came to the Bay Area that I could, I went and saw him work, took his facilitation class, read his books, watched his videos, and got to finally get a sense of how he was getting these dynamics to shift. It's quite profound work, and it's a lot of it counterintuitive and a lot of it different from our conventional understandings of things. So it takes a while to wrap your head and especially your heart around it. But once you do, it's like it opens up this doorway to the biggest blocks to everything we want. Because when I was just doing NLP, we could get a lot of changes with that. But there were places where things just wouldn't move, even with the best NLP. And when we found this work, this was the key to those things, these unconscious loyalties, the ways that we keep ourselves stuck or limited or suffering out of loyalty to someone who may even have been dead before we were born, and that we might not even know about or might not even like. So it was a way of discovering these generational impacts and loyalties. And loyalties is a little bit difficult to understand in this context, but many people have heard of survivor guilt, right? Someone who survives a tragedy feels incredibly guilty because of those who, so many died. They feel guilty for being alive. Yeah. Well, it works not just with death. If the people we came from suffered financially, or suffered in their, didn't have love, or were brokenhearted on a certain level, and it is usually not conscious, we feel guilty for having it better. And so people will limit their experience of life, of love, of money, of health, of the good things in life, so as to not have it too much better than the people we come from. And sometimes people will flat out replay the tragedies of the past. You can see that in the Kennedys. I could give you examples all day long, but some of you may remember Whitney Houston drowning, sadly, in a bathtub. And just, what was it, a year or 2 or 3 later, her daughter does the same thing. Her only child. And that's one of the most tragic examples, but almost everyone I meet, in one way or another, is limiting some part of their life to be loyal to or like the people they come from.
And what was it like for you when you first started facilitating?
Well, at first, I remember Hunter Beaumont, who was kind of Bert Hellinger's right-hand guy for a while. Hunter Beaumont said, learn everything you can, and then when you go to do the constellation, forget all about it. And that's incredibly good advice and very difficult, especially when you're new, because it looks so much easier when you're watching than it is when you actually step in to do it. And so when I am training people how to do it, what I'm wanting to give them is a framework for how to navigate what seems like an endless sea of possibilities without just doing it based on a rote set of procedures, because that won't work actually. This is a case where we can't just teach people recipes, we have to teach them how to cook.
Mm.
And we actually have to teach them how to understand what's going on in families, and use certain filters to be able to first off make clear what it is that's going on, and then hopefully to be able to offer some hope for a resolution, for a new resolution, a better resolution.
What were some of your most memorable learning moments when when first facilitating? Or
Actually, my biggest learning came when I had two constellations done for me. One by Gabrielle Bourcan, who was Bert Hellinger's right hand gal for a while. There was Hunter Beaumont and Gabrielle Bourcan. Gabrielle Bourcan was incredibly gifted, and I was so lucky to have her do a constellation for me. And after about half an hour, she turned to me and she said, "I'm so sorry, there's nothing we can do." Which I understood because I was looking at the same thing she was. So sometime later, I had another facilitator. It's about 6 months later, when I was feeling in a really bad way, another facilitator offered to do a constellation for me. And if the first one was grimmer, the second one was even worse. And so after that, I sat down and I just felt utterly, utterly hopeless. And I felt some part of me give up. And some part of me say, well, you know what? I'm just going to live my life and stop apologizing for it then. And within 10 minutes, I felt better. And I can mark a change in my life from that point on. It wasn't what I needed in this case, was not for things to get better. What I needed was to give up trying to make them better. Mm-hmm. So for me, it had to be completely hopeless. And the facilitator had to have the courage, and Gabrielle Bourcan had it, to not try and make something happen where there was nothing that could happen. And that's what allowed me to make peace with it, and that's what let me let go of it. So one of the things when I'm teaching that I'm trying to let people know, because Bert Hellinger said healing is a gift. When and if it happens, it's a gift. The other thing he said that until that moment I didn't understand was, he didn't say these words, but the effect of it was, let go of your preconceptions about what healing looks like. Because as Americans, we have this tendency to really want a happy ending. That kind of like at the end of Return of the Jedi, with the whole family there, even the ghosts, all looking happy. Mm-hmm. We just love a happy ending in this country. And it's good because it's what makes this country continually reach for what we want and to making our lives better. But in terms of this work, sometimes what's needed is being able to just look at something tragic and say, what a pity, as Bert Hellinger says, and let it be tragic. And it was in that finally letting it just be tragic that for me, I finally found the ability to let it go.
Wow.
So between those two, it's incredible work.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I think this feels kind of like on the same lines with it, but what you just said. But what impact has this work had on your personal life?
Well, it has changed. The constellation work is huge because it was after that moment where I gave up that I said, I'm going to stop apologizing for my life and for how I feel. And so within 2 months, I think, I was in the relationship which I've now been in ever since. It's been 14 years now. Well, no, yeah, 14 years now. And I am so happy. And so that shifted there. And the work I do now, because I end up doing a lot of trainings for people around money and money mindset and beliefs around money. And being able to incorporate this constellation work into that, because it is one of the biggest limitations on how much we will let ourselves have, is these unconscious family dynamics. It's allowed me to both experience personally and facilitate for other people incredibly deep changes and healings. Because the stuff that's in the way, we often don't realize how much of our life it's impacting. I mean, so for example, I was in Taiwan, and I was doing a constellation that was around money, but it went back to the Japanese occupation of Taiwan during World War II, and the terrible, terrible things that the people who lived through that had to both do and endure, and the shame of that. And so, although that constellation was for healing money, the repercussions of that healing will be in every area of not just that person's life, but everybody who was in the room who was either watching or participating in it. Everyone got huge shifts and changes, because one thing this work makes clear is we're so much more connected than we realize. So it is a communal healing that happened there, and that's available every time you do a constellation. You're never doing just one constellation. You're always doing multiple constellations simultaneously.